Okay, so here we are today on the 24th of November, 2024. And today is the day that the sun transitions from the days of Heather into the days of Aspen. And I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint to talk us through that. So this is our third year going around the Grove. If you want basic information about the aspen tree, you need to go onto the Ogham Grove YouTube channel and look for the aspen tree for 2022. That'll give you the basic lore. I will talk about some of it, but with each circle around the year, we're going into deeper things. So for basic introduction, it's the year 2022. If you're interested in the medicinal herbalism lore of the aspen tree, we did that in 2023. So again, for herbalism, aspen tree 2023. And this year is kind of our final year going around the circumference. We are going to do it next year, but in a different way. And this year we've been looking at which gods and goddesses of the Celtic mythology best correspond with each tree, looking at star lore and folk tales and stories to help us with that. Not setting up any dogma, but just helping people decide which pantheon makes sense to them. So your own grove of trees that you use for your own shamanic work or whatever, you do it your way. But each of your 20 trees is also corresponding with a god or goddess. So you've actually got a pantheon of 20 Celtic gods and goddesses in your grove, surrounding you, helping you, protecting you, and so on. So that's what we've been doing this year, looking around the 20 trees. So this is the penultimate tree. We've only got one tree left. And the aspen tree, the days of the aspen tree go from the 3rd degree of Sagittarius to the 21st degree of Sagittarius. So it's the only tree that is completely Sagittarius. And that Sagittarius law is very relevant to the oldest ancestors, as I'll explain, and also the center of the star realm. The star realm in lots of indigenous cultures are seen as the spirit world. And Sagittarius has a unique relationship with the galaxy that we live in, the Milky Way galaxy. So that's interesting. We'll look at that. So in zodiac lore, Scorpio, the scorpion, deals a death sting and stings Sagittarius. And so that moment of the death blow or the stabbing of the sting happened in the days of Heather. So Heather holds the cusp between Scorpio and Sagittarius. So that's when the scorpion stings the Sagittarius figure. Now we're into Aspen. The death blow has already been dealt. So Sagittarius is a stasis of death. It's just the stillness of death. And then when we get to the yew tree, there's rebirth with the winter solstice. And the interesting lore with the aspen tree is about death and burial, as is heather. The soil that covers a buried body is heather. So there is this kind of death connotations with it. But also then the death being the doorway to the spirit world. So whilst it's a bit grim saying Sagittarius is death, actually the doorway to the spirit world, the world of the stars, the ancestral realms, is where we are now. So it's like the wild hunt went through the pine forests down into the gorse and the heather for Samhain, and now it's ended up at the sacred burial ground. That's kind of what it is poetically. And so we're in the stillness and sanctuary of the ancestral burial grounds until we get to you and the rebirth time. So when I'm talking about death, it's not in any morbid way, but as in a very profound, sacred space, really. But that's ultimate death. There's also little deaths, and the little deaths are dreams and shamanic journeys. And by that, I mean that spirit guides that lead us to the spirit realm, psychopomps. When the day comes for your own death, the psychopomp will take you to the spirit realm. But every time you do a shamanic journey, you're delving into the dream realm. So there's a psychopomp nature to that, of going into the dream realm. And for a Celtic perspective, the main animal for that is the White Hart, the white stag. The white stag leads so many stories, Celtic mythology and Arthurian mythology. The stag, not always white, but sometimes just a normal stag, but often a white stag, is the beginning of any strange quest. And then the heroes or the knights or the pilgrims or main characters follow the stag into some strange, surreal story. But it seems to be the psychopomp itself. And it's the totem of the wintertime, of course. The wintertime is the realm of sleep, as in little death as opposed to big death. Here, how it's played out in the Ogham. And Bridget just touched on this before we started recording. Both the birch tree and the aspen tree can look very similar from a distance. They've both got white tree trunks, and in the autumn, they've got yellow leaves. But the aspen is that stasis of death, the stillness of death, trusting in the spirit world. And that leads us to the moment of rebirth at winter solstice with the yew tree. And then the birch tree is the beginning of a brand new cycle. So a lovely image that Bridget pointed out was that the yew tree, is flanked by two white pillars, an aspen tree and a birch tree. It's lovely. But that's the death, the solstice, and the rebirth. Natural patterns in the Ogham Grove. So for this moment in time, the Days of Aspen is primarily just the star law of Sagittarius. And Sagittarius, very important. But you can see here at the bottom, says Sagittarius below the curved dashed circle line. That's the ecliptic. But directly above Sagittarius are the three birds, Aquila the eagle, Cygnus the swan, and Lyra the harp was seen as a small bird. So when we looked at it earlier in the year, when the three summer birds are in the night sky in the summertime, the hunter and hound are below the horizon. And now in the wintertime, the hunter and hound are in the night sky, the constellation Orion and Canis Major. And because they're in the night sky, the three birds are below the horizon, which is where the sun is here with Sagittarius. So Sagittarius simply means the archer. And if you look inside the cluster of the three birds, there's a small constellation called Sagitta. Sagitta just means arrow. So the symbolism of the archer shooting his arrow into the area of the three birds. It's not killing any of them, but the arrow is flying through the three birds. It's interesting. These are the birds of Rhiannon and so on. But that's the star law pattern where we are now. I'm not going to go too much into the birds at all. I want to talk about Sagittarius himself. for a very, very long time, going way back to Mesopotamia. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Inside every aspen twig is a five-pointed star. Also applies to popular trees, or most of the popular trees. So Sagittarius is this great, important figure in the stars. And the aspen tree actually has stars running through it. So of all the trees in the Ogham, that's unique, really, to the aspen tree. I've only ever seen it in one other tree, and not very often. Occasionally, you get a five-pointed star in an oak twig, but I've only ever seen it a few times in oak, but always in aspen. Now, here's the weird thing then. So you've got the aspen tree, which is clearly a tree of stars, in Sagittarius. Now, I don't think the ancient people knew this, or maybe they did, but they would need super telescopes. But it's a wonderful synchronicity or other that Sagittarius actually holds the galactic center of our galaxy. So you've got the tree of stars in the zodiac sign that holds the galactic center, the center point around which the Milky Way rotates, is only in Sagittarius. So if there was a celestial figure pointing or aiming their arrow at the center of the galaxy, it's Sagittarius that does that. Quite amazing. Again, did the ancient people know that? Did shamanic visionaries know that? Or is it just a wonderful coincidence with modern telescopes? So Sagittarius then in the wheel of classical deities, and we touched on it in the last session with Heather. Sagittarius traditionally corresponded with the king of the gods, Zeus or Jupiter. And the aspen tree then completely corresponds with that. So the Dagda would really correspond very well because he's a Zeus of the Irish Celtic gods, and the Welsh equivalent would be Beli-Mor, the father god of the Welsh pantheon. But there's another deity that Dagda is also conflated with, and I'll come to him shortly. So where I went wrong a little bit, I'll come back to now. So Sagittarius has long been seen as an archer, going way, way back to pre-classical times to Mesopotamia. This Sagittarius constellation corresponded with a Sumerian god called, I don't know how you pronounce it, Pabilsag, and he's a centaur type figure. He's part horse, part man, shooting his bow and arrow, and that's the constellation of Sagittarius. The interesting thing with Pabilsag is that the name means chief ancestor. Well, really interesting about the galactic center, the star realm being the realm of ancestors, and here's this ancient constellation being the chief of ancestors. And then in the classical world, it's Jupiter and Zeus. Interesting ideas. Now, we have, the Druids wrote nothing down. We only know, really, what archaeology has left on stone inscriptions, which isn't a great deal. It's just names inscribed on stone. There's no long explanation of anything. And some early writings by Romans. So Julius Caesar, writing about 50 BC, described the gods and goddesses that the Celt Druids worshipped, but he didn't give the Celtic name. He used what they call interpretatio Romana. That is, he said their most favorite god was Mercury. But of course, the Celts didn't call their favorite god Mercury. That's just the Roman interpretation of that. So here's another twist with that then. So Julius Caesar said that the Gauls, the Celts, claimed as their ancestor that they originated from a god called Dis Pater. But Dis Pater is a Roman name. But Dis Pater is, from a Roman perspective, a god of death. But that's not quite true. He's a god of the underworld and the wealth and the riches of the underworld. That is precious stones and metals and minerals, so the soil is where food can grow from. The seeds grow in the soil, but also deeper below the soil is the wealth and the riches of the underworld. So Dis Pater, like Pluto, like Hades, was a god of wealth and rich pickings and stuff, so he was a beloved or desirable ally if you wanted to acquire wealth and so on. So Julius Caesar is saying that the Gauls, the Druids and the Celts claimed to originate, or claimed that Dis Pater was their ancestor. So what do we make of that? How do we make sense of that? It could be that they saw the ancestral realms as an underworld, or that the hidden realm was the wealth of all that people needed, and there is an Irish god that is often equated with the Dagda. So Dagda corresponds with Jupiter and Zeus and Sagittarius. And the Irish god is Donn, D-O-N-N, not to be confused with the goddess Donn or Danu. So this is Donn, is a god of death, but very much a psychopompic god, that when people died, they would go to the realm of Donn, that it was some sort of otherworld place in the West where the dead went to. So under Roman Europe, that got replaced with Dis. The place of death was known as Dis, or people from the otherworld were people from Dis and stuff. But Dis Pater just means father, so it just means wealth father, or great father, or however you want to call it. But that's only according to Julius Caesar, that the Celts claimed descent from Dis Pater. So looking then, following on from that, at the riches of the earth, the wealth of the underworld, that then is very, very significant to Celtic mythology, where various heroes go into the otherworld or the underworld and bring treasures back that benefit people. You could relate that to shamanism too, that the shaman goes into a parallel realm or a spirit realm and brings back information or knowledge that benefits the tribe, that somehow delving into the darkness, treasures of light and knowledge or whatever can be brought back into this world. So that's a psychopompic thing. And it might just be that simple that, the Celts believed they came from the other world. It might be like that this, like the Australian Aboriginal dream time, this so-called wide awake reality is just an 80-year dream that your eternal self is having. Your eternal self's in the other world, if you like. Anyway, here's some interesting things. So these diagrams are from the Book of Ballymote, which is a famous Irish book, dates to about 1390. It's a compilation of lots of different things, and inside of it, a section of it is all about the Ogham. And so these Ogham diagrams are there in the Book of Ballymote. Now, the famous one we've kind of looked at a few times is the one in the middle. It's called the Fedge Fin, Fion's Window, or Fion's Ridgepole. But I want to draw your attention to the smaller circle on the right-hand side. I'm going to zoom in on that for you. So in the corner, it's divided into 4 quarters, and each quarter has a spiral inside it. I've done a bigger, cleaner illustration on the left-hand side. The swirly spirals are mine just to show you the direction that things are flowing. But you can look in the bottom right-hand corner, and it looks like a letter C. There's one of them, and it's dot, 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 and then there's 2 letter C's, and then some more dots, and then going up, there's 3 letter C's, and then coming around, there's 4 letter C's. So it's got this kind of numerical spiral. So that's what I've illustrated on the left, that the 2 top corners are spiraling upwards energetically for whatever reason. I'm not saying I know what the reason is. I'm just pointing at a pattern. And the lower quarter are spiraling downwards. So at the very least, looking at the circle on the right, the 4 quarters, the 2 top quarters, energy is spiraling up, and the lower quarters, energy is spiraling down. And the writing around them has Aim on the right-hand side bottom. Aim is the pine tree, so that's the 4th Acma. And on the left, you've got Beeth, that's the birch tree, so that's the 1st Acma. So the dividing line, the vertical line, where it goes down to 6 o'clock, that's the yew tree, that's winter solstice. So it's dividing a circle into 2 halves. One half energy is rising upwards, and the other half energy is rising downwards or spiraling downwards. Make of that what you will. It's interesting, though, that it corresponds with what we've observed with the year wheel of the Ogham Grove. So we're in the 4th Acma, and the energy has been spiraling down. We're descending down into the darker months, into the darkness, into the earth. Heather literally means earth, you are, and heather takes us to the aspen tree almost at the bottom, and that moment of death. Into the lower regions, into the realm of Pater, into the realm of Hades, into the realm of Pluto, or however you want to think about it. You know, there is this descending downwards into the darker time of the year. And then there's that wonderful, beautiful moment of winter solstice and the rebirth, and then the days get longer and the light grows again. So there's a rising upwards, which happens with the 1st Acma from the birch tree. The beautiful, that our own, you know, these patterns in the Ogham Grove are kind of echoing these patterns that are there in the Book of Ballymote. Can be coincidental, of course, but it's a wonderful bit of serendipity or synchronicity. So the riches of the earth then. That would kind of give the deity of this moment in time, that Father Dis, great ancestor, which is what Sagittarius was, even in ancient Mesopotamia, the chief of ancestors. And Aspen is the star tree, and the center of the starry galaxy is there in Sagittarius, and the stars are running through the Aspen branches. I had long thought about each quarter of this wheel having a story, that each Acma has its theatre or ceremony, or song, poetry, that there is a story in each quarter. And previously, when we've done tree meditations, when I've come to the aspen trees, I've said, imagine a centaur in the aspen forest. And that's because of Sagittarius being a centaur. But now I'm thinking very differently. And really, that's because, the totem animal for the wintertime and the totem animal of the winter hunter is the stag. So it's a bit obvious, really, but I don't know why it's taken me this long to swap the centaur for a white stag. So that's what I'm going to do for the time being, only because the white stag or the hart or the deer is much more Celtic than the centaur. Centaur's classical Greece and Sumeria and so on. Nothing wrong with it, of course. And Sagittarius just means archer, doesn't mean centaur, just means archer. So any archer pursuing and hunting is using his bow and the constellation of the arrow to chase. So the story then, I kind of see that there's a lot of stories, say like in the Mabinogion, the very first branch of the Mabinogion is the story of Quill, uh, meeting the Lord of the Underworld and looking after the underworld for a while. They swap roles. So the Lord of the Underworld comes and looks after Quill's kingdom, whilst Quill looks after the Lord of the Underworld's kingdom. At the very beginning of that story is Quill is hunting and he sees a stag get caught. So it's that stag is the first symbol of a mystery or adventure in the underworld or the otherworld. Same too in the fourth branch of the Mabinogi, the goddess Blodayeth, when her husband is away, sees a deer run by and it's being chased, and she sees the hunter of the deer and falls in love with him, and he's very much a lord of the otherworld. So the deer is the totem in Celtic stories of the lord of the unseen world, other world, shamanic realm, inner world, however you want to think about it. And that carries on then into Arthurian romances. And it's in the Arthurian romances when things make a definite shift from just a stag in general to the White Hart. The White Hart is a creature mystical of medieval Europe. And the White Hart appears regularly in Arthurian romances. And it's always a kind of otherworldly psychopomp. If you chase the White Hart, you're going to end up in a surreal twilight zone where mysterious things are going to happen. So it seems only right then, kind of using that for the story of the fourth Acma, so it begins with a pine tree and the young warriors getting ready to hunt. And what are they hunting? Yes, there's the wild hunt of gathering souls, and the wild hunt is a psychopomp itself, but they're going to chase something. So stag or boar is what Celtic warriors chased, stags and boars. So chasing the White Hart, as that's going to lead them all the way to the winter solstice. So can imagine them chasing the White Hart through the gorse, heathland, and then to the moment of Samhain, and then continue chasing the White Hart through the heather. And then the White Hart finds its way into the aspen forest, and maybe that's where it stops and looks at everybody, because that's the moment of death. You've gone through the veil of death, you've gone through Samhain. And now there is just the spirit realm until the winter solstice and the rebirth. I've done pictures of white harts for a long time. The symbolism is so massive. I equate them, like you can equate the swan with Bridget, or you can equate ravens with Morrigan. For me, the winter hunter or the lord of the otherworld or the lord of the fairy realm is the white stag. And I would speculate that's why the Canunus figure wears antlers, to represent being the consort of the goddess. And she's there with the yew tree. She's Nemetona, of course. So the white stag is hers. It's her sacred animal as well. And in Arthurian romances, the goddess of the land, they just, because they're Christianized, they just call her the empress. And her most sacred thing is the white stag, you know. And if the white stag gets harmed, calamity happens, and the empress pretty angry, and the land becomes a wasteland, and so on. So we've done a lot with the white stag. I've just finished drawing the last illustrations for the Ogham Grove Oracle deck. And for there's 16 Grove cards, and they're a bit like the major arcana of the tarot, but there's not 22 of them, there's just 16. But the first one, a bit like the Fool being the first of the major arcana, the beginning of a journey, if you like. The first one for the Ogham Grove Oracle is the self, the individual. And the illustration is that they followed or made their way into the forest, and they've encountered the White Hart is there. So then, you know, whether it's a shamanic journey, a 10-minute meditation you're doing, or the season going into winter and the death and all the leaves falling off the trees until rebirth, or literally when the time comes and we all cross over to the star realm, that, you know, the white stag, the symbol of the goddess, and the consort of the goddess, leading us into the spirit realm. So that happens in lots of different ways. There's the big ultimate death, and there's the little deaths, the shamanic journeys. So in the Oracle deck, the self encountering the White Hart is the beginning of an adventure somewhere. So just to conclude a little bit, this is coming up to the end of our 3rd year going around the grove, visiting each tree as the sun enters each tree. 2022 basic law, 2023 herbalism, 2024 gods and goddesses, and the next session will be the yew tree and the goddess Nemetona, and that will conclude this year. Next year we'll still be visiting each tree, but not covering any of the ground that we've already covered. The videos are there on YouTube. You can go back to them whenever you want. So now we've spent 3 years going around the circumference of the grove, as it were. Next year, we're going to go into the middle of the grove. We're going to go into the center and look at different things we can do in that sacred space, or from that shamanic threshold. You know, you've got this sacred circle of trees, 20 gods and goddesses watching your back, whilst you do your inner work. You know, the word Anun means inner world. So the self encountering the white stag is those baby steps into the inner world, the spirit world, and just letting that grow and unfold. So next year, we'll be looking at each of the 16 grove cards, which are esoteric ideas about what to do deeper inside the Ogham Grove. Right, if we've spent long enough going around the circumference. One thing I would say just before concluding is that the pattern of the year from a Celtic perspective is that the year simplistically is divided into 2 halves. There is the lighter half, which you could call the summertime, and it's governed by the bull, the red bull, or just the bull. And then there's the winter half, governed by the stag. Now that duality of yin and yang, light and dark, can be worked with in lots of different ways, and we'll be exploring that next year. So one way of working with it is going into the dream world or the shamanic world or the vision quest. So this is how that works. The summertime is the wide awake world. It's the domesticated, civilized normality, the light half. The darker time is the dream world. And so there are two stages of threshold dreaming. One is called hypnagogic. That's when you're wide awake and then you fall asleep. It's easy to remember because it's gogic, going to sleep. So hypnagogic. So the dreams you have when you're going from wide awake into falling asleep, the hypnagogic dreams are kind of like the garbled gobbledygook stuff generally. It's like the brain defragmenting and making sense of things. But the more magical thing then is being asleep and waking up. So they call that hypnopompic. So that's when you get dreams that are premonitions and insights, and people wake up knowing a whole song or an idea for a book or all those things. Yeah, these are the treasures stolen from the other world, that the shaman has gone into the dream world, brought something back that benefits the tribe, the riches of the underworld, the treasures of the underworld. King Arthur and his knights looking for the cauldron of the other world. These are those kind of shamanic ideas. So like in a little while, we're going to meditate to the aspen tree, but every time you meditate, you're going gogic, you're going into the dream realm, and you're there for however long you're there, and then you wake up, and as you wake up, the hypnopompic visions and insights and inspirations, the treasure can be grabbed as you come back into the so-called normal world. So I'll stop there. You can put your microphones back on and we'll talk about some of those ideas.
Wow, wonderful presentation.
Yes. Yes, just lovely.
Hi, Vanya.
Hello, love. Yeah. Oh, nice to see you all.
Yuri, this was just fabulous. I mean, it was almost like you were done, and then you started talking about next year, and then all of a sudden you went into this huge new realm about what I believe probably you'll be talking about next year, the hypnagogic and the hypnopompic dreaming, which I hadn't really given that much thought about which dreams I remember and why. The important ones do come from that deep inner sleep place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Some of the, there's traditions of medieval Irish poets will lock themselves away for days in darkness, in a dark house with no light, and they just spend days in the darkness to get their poetry. So they were symbolically and literally really delving deep into the darkness to find inspiration. And that's done in lots of different ways, but that's as much psychopompic as the Archangel Michael, your hand to the next world. A shaman is working with psychopompic spirits constantly, and really we are, our spirit guides are with us, our guardian angels are with us every time we go to sleep and wake up, so they're all metaphors for themselves, aren't they? There's, that idea of an ancestral deity being the deity of the realm of dead or the darkness or the underworld or the other world. But really it's the riches and, not mundane wealth like gold, but the imbus and arwen that comes from the deep, dark space of meditation.
Mhm. You know, I've been having dreams, I'd say over the past few months. Occasionally I'll have what I call an active dream. That's what I started to call it. And I had one the other night again. And these active dreams, I call them active dreams because the past two, I've actually thrown myself out of bed, literally thrown myself out of bed. The one I had before, the one this week, I hit my head really hard, gave myself a concussion.
Oh, geez.
The other night, I had one and I threw myself out of bed, but this time I tucked and rolled. So I didn't hurt myself. And I'm wondering what that can mean. Any ideas? I've had like 4 active dreams in the past probably 2 years. Any ideas about that? Am I projecting astrally? Or, I mean, I don't know what's going on.
Does anyone
Okay.
know what's going on?
I've not experienced that, but not all the time, but maybe once or twice a year, I have premonition dreams. And I also wake up, and before I'm awake, I get a lot of clairaudient voices. And they're often gobbledygook, but some of them have led to quite profound discoveries as well. But I know singers like Paul McCartney and Christine McVie from Fleetwood Mac woke up with complete songs.
Mm.
You know, but I don't know. I haven't experienced what you're saying, Amy, about kind of lurching out of bed.
Scary.
No, I haven't done that.
Yeah,
I
literally throwing
studied
myself
with,
out of bed.
yeah, Amy, I studied with a Mexican guy doing the Toltec lucid dreaming over a course of a year. And one of the things that I learned was that a really good thing to do is when you come out of that sort of dream is get back in and ask to go back to it again. And if it has been upsetting, you have the power to change it to be something that is positive. On a personal level, something that happened to me that was very profound. I trained in pharmacies and things, and very, very medical, blah, blah, blah. I woke up about 30 years ago and I wanted to be a reflexologist. And I had no idea what a reflexologist was. And that was my first step. So he always said, Sergio always said, if you get out of bed to go to the loo, have a drink of water and get back in, because it's this in between stages that you pick up that you can bring into your forward mind. It's interesting though, because the last few nights, I don't know what's been going on in my dream world, but I have been dreaming a lot. But my bedclothes have been all over the place. You know, my duvet is in like a bunch, and I think, what on earth? Because normally I'm quite still. So I do think that we are being affected, globally on the astral by what's going on at the moment. I really do. And actually the weather that we're having now here in England is so. I think that your active dreams are for you in your dream state to actually get to the point where you can actually use them in a constructive way. That's my take on it anyway, from what I learned. If that helps.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Just
Thank
thinking what Rosemary mentioned about what's going on at this moment in time is, of course, the planet Pluto has shifted from Capricorn to Aquarius for the next 20 odd years or so. And Pluto is Hades, is Pater, is Donn. So the god of death has shifted into a complete new sign for 20 odd years. So that's interesting.
Mm.
I'm not
I've
on
had
the
repetitive bad dreams
yeah.
that just before the bad thing happened, I would wake up. But, and it was, okay, you're wide awake now.
I'm
But
sorry, change of subject. Yuri, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Question about the White Hart. Could you please explain that more?
Explain it more.
Yes.
As
this
far
is
as
her first time.
yes, no, as what is it you wanted me to explain?
Well, I kind of equated the White Hart as the stag or the boar. But you also explained that the White Hart was chasing.
Okay. Yeah.
So is it the act of chasing the stag or the boar, or is it more of the intent?
Yeah, so there's certain symbols and motifs that occur in stories, and they're deliberate. So in medieval Grail stories, whenever the Grail procession is about to happen, a white dove flies through the room. So there's certain triggers or symbols that initiate a kind of sequence that's going to happen. So in Celtic stories, whenever there's a hunt for a stag, that's often the beginning of the story. That's kind of like the very first chapter is the stag's being hunted, and then the adventure unfolds. That's traditional with Welsh stories and old Celtic stories. And then when you get to medieval times, it gets specifically the White Hart. So in the older stories, it's just a stag being hunted. But in medieval Christian Arthurian stories, it's a White Hart that's being hunted. It's something much more sacred and holy and otherworldly than a regular stag. So in Celtic myth, animals of the otherworld are usually white and shining. So you can have white dogs, lots of white boars, white owls. So the white stag means it's not of this world. It's something otherworldly.
Ethereal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
it found its way into heraldry.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there's hundreds of
Yuri,
pubs called the White Hart.
Yuri, there's I so often you give me aha moments about my local area here where the Mabinogion, some of the Mabinogion is sighted with Push and the underworld. And the river that runs through it starts off the main spring secondary, but the main river at the beginning was called the Empress. And so I thought that was so interesting because of this connection. And I haven't heard of the White Stag and the Empress thing before.
So listen, Vanya, not everyone will agree with me about this, but it's okay. In the story, The Dream of Max and Hledeg, which is in the Mabinogion, the Emperor of Rome dreams, shamanic dreams of Ellen. And he finds her, and when he finally gets to her, he stands before her and very arrogantly he says, Empress of Rome, i.e. that he wants to marry her and make her the Empress of Rome.
Oh, wow.
So on the one hand, Ellen is the sovereignty goddess of Wales, but the emperor, she's Empress of Rome. So she has him build three towns or cities, which are Caerleon, Carmarthen, and Carnarvon. They're the three cities he had to build her as a marriage gift. And And those towns are connected by ancient roads called Sarn Ellen or Ellen's Causeway.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
if you make a triangle out of those three places, the exact center of that triangle is Elenith, where the five mountains
Oh
are.
my goodness.
Yeah, and flowing from Elenith is the river Elan, E-L-A-N, E-L-A-N, and Elan means a young deer,
yeah.
a young fawn.
Elon.
Yeah, so that's the kind of Welsh
Ah,
stuff there. Now, when you get to the
that's
Arthurian stories, the goddess of the land isn't called Ellen; she's just called the Empress. But the only empress in British mythology is Ellen, when the empress says Empress of Rome, you know. So suddenly there's this ethereal, otherworldly empress in the Grail stories, and she has a white stag.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
always find the white stag to be very heartful. And sometimes when I'm doing the zodiac walks over here, when we do Sagittarius, Taurus, it's in Bushy Park. And very often when we're doing it, we actually see a white deer. It may not be a stag, but a white deer will appear. And I've always felt that the symbolism of the white stag and the White Hart is very heartfelt. It makes me personally feel really good and uplifted and connected to,
Yes.
love, basically.
Yes.
That's how I find it.
I usually cry when I see
It's spiritful.
that
It's
in
the
symbolism.
White Hart is in the story of Herne the Hunter at Windsor Forest as well. You know, it recurs. And there's even, I read a book called Guardian of the Grail by John Whitehead. And he looked at the White Hart in heraldry on shields and banners and stuff. And he claimed that the White Hart was the symbol of the old religion, that is the pre-Christian paganism of the British Isles, that the White Hart represented the old religion, you know.
I can imagine that.
Yeah, it's the symbol of the Lord of the Woods,
Yeah.
you know.
Exactly.
And you know the spirals, Yuri, the spirals in the circle. The spirals in the circle that you put up.
Yeah.
The two going one way at the top and two going the other way at the bottom.
Yes.
It's really interesting. I had a herbal garden where I did two spirals and I put time on each. And the one going down developed huge rooting system, and the one going up created an amazing upper part, and the birds all came to the down one, and you know, it was so interesting. It was like there was a pull, there was an energetic pull going into that on each one, and the other one had the energetic pull going out. Wasn't that amazing? I just thought that's so interesting to see that spoken of there. You spoke of.
Yeah, and you know, I'm really reluctant to claim any dogma, and I just wouldn't, because I don't think the other world speaks to us with dogma anyway. So it's perfectly okay. It's perfectly right to live with mystery and contradiction and so on. So when I'm showing things, I'm just showing patterns that I've seen, you know, and that symbol does have half the circle spiraling down and half the circle spiraling up. Make of it what you will, you know. In some ways it's the summer half of the year is spiraling up and the winter half is spiraling down. There's like sap rising and energy retreating back into the earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Even with schools.
I wanted to cite two things. One is just you said dogma. In the Temple of Isis, we call it Katma because it's the mystery. There is no way to, it's cats, not dogs. And then the other thing I want to say is kind of sad, actually. We've had an incredible herd of white deer here for decades. A wealthy man brought this herd to this 3,000-acre ranch in a beautiful valley. Nearby, it was a church, an unusual kind of church situation. And I've loved them my whole life and see them on various ends of the property. And a few years ago, someone came and poached all the stags. They killed and took away all the stags. And we have just been heartbroken here, absolutely heartbroken, trying to find ourselves a male deer to repopulate that herd, which is only about three ladies now, just on their own in a field. And it just needs our heart, the heart, what Rosemary was saying about the heart being the heart. And I believe that community and our entire region really needs that, those white stags to come back to us. And so I just want to call out my, for everyone sending.
I think we'll all send thoughts to that, and our positive thoughts that a stag will appear very soon. And, something that we all know is that white things like the white buffalo to the Native Americans, when a white buffalo is born, it's sacred. And I actually personally support Linda Tucker in South Africa with the white lions. And the white lions of Timbavati are on a special energy line. And I've met her and I've done workshops with her and everything. And they are holding energy. And I really do think these white animals do hold special energy. And it would be heartbreaking what's happened there, Anne. It must be really goes straight into your heart, and it's very painful. So I'm visualizing you getting a stag coming soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rosemary.
I know there are that thought for you.
They cost money. Unfortunately, it translates to money. It's like 30,000, 50,000, whatever.
No.
I know. Don't buy one. We're not going to buy one.
Money at all.
One is going to appear. Thank you.
Yuri,
isn't that?
This is Jenny.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Jenny. Hi, everyone. This is my first time joining you from Wisconsin, United States. So my question is, I have a special place in my heart for white does. And so the females, do you have a mythology or connection around that?
It's there if you read between the lines. So a lot of the old stories, conspiracy theory, were written down by Christian scribes. So they take the gods and goddesses out of stories. They turn gods and goddesses into human beings, and any meaningful symbolism of animals also gets lost. But reading between the lines then, so in Ireland, there's a culture hero god called Finn McCool, and his partner was a fairy woman, i.e. divine feminine of the land, and she was turned into a deer by an evil druid. She and him live together for a while, and she gets pregnant, and then she gets tricked away from him and he loses her. But years later, he finds a boy who looks like she did and looks like him, and he calls the boy Oisin. Oisin becomes a famous poet in Ireland. But here's the thing then, Oisin means little deer, and his mother was a female nature spirit who was turned into a deer, which makes Finn McCool a stag man. So reading between the lines, there's that. So then there are statues in Gaul from the 3rd century of women with antlers. Now, some people think they're shaman women. Some people see them as goddesses with antlers. It's cutting a long story short, but the summer months belong to the bull, and the winter months belong to the stag. They're the two creatures of the winter and summer. So the goddess of the land in the winter time is a deer. So her consort has to have antlers, sort of thing. So then when you get into medieval romances, there will be stories of a golden hind or a white hind. It's the same sort of thing because golden never tarnishes. It's infinite, isn't it? Eternal gold. And so the radiant shining white is the same. So a white doe or a white hind or a golden hind is the divine female of the land as well. So it's a symbol for the empress or the sovereignty goddess. But there's lots and lots of stories of fairy women turning into deer as well. So what does that mean? It means that the deer as a wild animal is a symbol for the other world, the fairy realm, whereas the bull is the farming, agricultural, domestic animal. So the deer represents that which is wild and feral, and we are both. So it is we have the double nature. We are the bull and the stag. That is that in the wide awake world, we know how to be domesticated, how to behave politely in society, you know. But in our dream worlds, we're feral, we're wild, we're free, we're fairy, you know, and the heart yearns for as well, you know. But that's what you're dealing with stories that talk about interaction between the human world and the fairy world, or the wide awake and the dreaming.
Thank you so much. That was really, really helpful. My sun is 4 degrees Sagittarius, and I have a lot of planets in Scorpio, so I'm completely familiar with the, you know, the darkness, and it's really cool to realize that, you know, my love for, you know, the white hind and whatnot relates to my own maybe shamanic inclinations. So thank you.
I would, you know, this is modern paganism. I can't back this up with anything, but I would see the White Hart go all the way to the winter solstice as consort to Nemetona, if you like. But then a brand new cycle begins with Ellen, who is a deer. You know, she's the bright flame of a new cycle, and she's an aspect of Nemetona, if you like, you know. And yeah, so you descend down into the stag time of year and you rise up into the bull time of year. So all of these winter months are the stag time of year. And yeah, the white hind and the white hart. Just before we meditate, years ago, I went to a talk about dream deprivation, and it was really interesting. This had been studied at various universities in England. And just wrapping it up really quickly, the results they got from studying dream deprivation, not sleep. The volunteers were allowed to sleep, but as soon as they had rapid eye movement, they got woken up. So you're interrupting the dreams. So it's dream deprivation. And their conclusions were this, that most people, unless they've got a serious illness or drug abuse or something, most people dream 4 times a night, whether they remember it or not. So you don't always remember your dreams, but we all dream 4 times a night. And here's the interesting thing then, apart from hypnagogic and hypnopompic types of dreaming, what they learnt was if you had dream deprivation for 3 or 4 nights, you begin to hallucinate. And if you have dream deprivation for 7 nights, you cannot tell hallucination from reality. That's psychosis. So all of us are 7 nights dream deprivation away from being psychotic. Wow. It's interesting. The conclusion is that the dream world will be heard. It will punch its way through to our so-called normal reality as hallucinations, you cannot deny the dream world. It will come through. And that's really interesting. Yeah. So
That makes sense.
I'll stop recording and we'll do a little meditation to the aspen tree.